My husband kept saying he'd leave me for my best friend if he ever had the chance, so I packed his bags and said, "Do it now." He went pale and started backpedaling, but I was done playing games. Keith had this routine he'd pull whenever my best friend Natalie came over. "If I had the chance, I'd leave you for her in a heartbeat," he'd announce, laughing like it was comedy gold. Natalie would shift uncomfortably in her seat. I'd force a smile and change the subject. "Just a joke," he'd always add when he saw my face. "Don't be so sensitive." But Keith didn't limit his comedy routine to private moments. At dinner parties, he'd raise his glass and declare, "Man, Natalie, if you ever get tired of your boyfriend, I'm available. You just have to get rid of my wife first." At my birthday party, in front of 20 guests, he announced, 35 looks better on Natalie than you, babe. If she'd have me, I'd already be gone." The nervous laughter from our friends always stung worse than his actual words. The pattern was relentless and calculated. Keith worked in sales, so he understood timing and audience. He'd save his most cutting comments for moments when I couldn't respond without looking like the problem. Family gatherings were his specialty. At Thanksgiving with my parents, he told the entire table, "You know who should have married into this family? Natalie, she's basically perfect. Too bad she puts up with me being second choice." My mom looked horrified. My dad cleared his throat and changed the subject. My sister asked if Keith was drunk, which only made him laugh harder. What Keith didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything. As a financial analyst for a mid-sized consulting firm, I'm trained to spot patterns and quantify problems. I'd started keeping a running list of every comment, every date, every witness present. By the time Natalie came over that Tuesday evening to help me prep for a client presentation, I had 43 documented incidents over 6 months. Keith came home early from his sales calls and immediately launched into his routine. "Well, well, my two favorite ladies. Natalie, have you reconsidered my offer?" "What offer?" she asked, though her voice was tight with discomfort. "To run away together. Leave all this behind, start fresh, just you and me." I watched Natalie's face crumble with embarrassment, and something inside me shifted from hurt to cold calculation. This was a business problem that required a business solution. I stood up and looked Keith directly in the eyes. "You know what, Keith? Let's do it." His confident smirk faltered. "What?" "You keep saying you'd leave me for Natalie if you had the chance. Here's your chance." I walked toward our bedroom with purpose. I've been counting, by the way. 43 times in 6 months. You told my parents. You told your parents. You told our neighbors. So let's stop joking and make it real. I pulled out his largest suitcase and started methodically packing his clothes. Shirts, pants, underwear, toiletries, phone charger. Keith appeared in the doorway, his sales-trained confidence evaporating. "What are you doing?" he called out, panic creeping into his voice. "Giving you what you want. Your chance with Natalie." "Stop it. This is insane. I'm not doing anything. You're being crazy." I dragged the suitcase to the living room where Natalie sat frozen on our couch. "Here's his stuff, Natalie. He's all yours." Natalie stood up immediately, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I have a boyfriend, Keith. I've told you this 100 times. I'm not interested, never have been, never will be." "But Keith said you love the attention," I added, my voice steady and professional. "He said all women love it." Natalie turned on him with fury I'd never seen before. "Is that what you think? That I enjoy you making those comments? That I like you talking about leaving your wife for me?" Keith was getting red now, his usual smooth talk abandoning him. "It's just jokes. Everyone knows that." "Your wife doesn't think it's funny. I don't think it's funny. Who exactly thinks it's funny?" He had no answer. I pushed the suitcase toward him with my foot. "Go ahead, ask her out. This is your big chance, the one you've been talking about for months." Keith looked between us desperately. "This is ridiculous. You're both overreacting." That's when Natalie pulled out her phone, and I saw Keith's face go completely white. Should I call Tom? Tell him you're propositioning me again." "Again?" I asked, though I was starting to piece together a larger picture. "He does this when you're not around too," Natalie said, her voice shaking with anger. "Asks me to coffee. Texts me about how much better I'd be for him than you. Shows up at my gym." Keith's face went from red to pale in seconds. My analytical mind immediately started calculating the scope of this problem. This wasn't just public humiliation designed to keep me insecure. This was active pursuit of my best friend behind my back. Natalie grabbed her purse and coat, walking past Keith without another word. She stopped next to me and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This isn't your fault," I told her, and I meant it. After she left, Keith tried to rebuild his position. "Okay, that got a little out of hand. We're all being dramatic here." 43 times, Keith. That's not dramatic. That's a pattern. Natalie's blowing things way out of proportion. I was being friendly. She's your best friend. Of course I'm nice to her. I pulled out my phone, finger hovering over Tom's contact. "Why were you texting her? Why were you showing up at her gym when I wasn't around?" "I wasn't showing up at her gym. We go to the same gym. It's not like I was stalking her." "You asked her to coffee multiple times. You told her she deserves better than Tom." I watched his face cycle through denial, anger, and finally something approaching panic. "What context makes any of that appropriate for a married man?" Keith ran his hands through his hair, his polished sales persona completely gone. "Look, maybe I was too friendly, but Natalie is making it sound creepy when it wasn't." "Fine," I said, pulling up Tom's number. "Let's call Tom right now. You can explain to him how you were just being friendly. Tell him about all those texts. Tell him about the coffee invitations. Tell him how you keep saying you'd leave me for his girlfriend." "Don't call Tom," Keith said quickly, holding up both hands. "Okay, maybe I crossed some lines, but I never meant anything by it. I love you. You know that." "Then why do you keep telling everyone you'd leave me for Natalie?" He couldn't answer. For the first time in our 2-year marriage, Keith had no smooth response, no deflection, no way to make me feel like I was the problem. "You need to leave tonight so I can think," I told him. "This is my apartment too," Keith protested, his voice getting louder. "You can't just kick me out." "Your suitcase is already packed. You can stay at your parents' house or get a hotel, but you're not staying here tonight." The argument went in circles for another hour, but my position never wavered. Keith was a salesman, trained to find angles and leverage points, but I was a financial analyst, trained to quantify problems and implement systematic solutions. His emotional manipulation tactics had no effect on my spreadsheet mindset. Finally, he picked up the suitcase. "Fine, I'll go, but this is ridiculous. You're throwing away our marriage because you can't take a joke." I opened the door and watched him walk out, my hands shaking as I turned the deadbolt behind him. But the shaking wasn't from fear or sadness. It was from adrenaline. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly in my own apartment. I called my sister immediately. "Keith's gone. I kicked him out." "Good," she said without hesitation. "I'll be there first thing in the morning with coffee and breakfast. Are you okay?" "I think so. Better than I've been in a while." "You did the right thing. Call me if you need anything tonight. I mean it. Anything." That night, Keith sent 3 increasingly desperate texts. "You're overreacting. This is insane. I'm coming home tomorrow whether you like it or not." I screenshot each message and started a new folder on my phone labeled Documentation. My analytical training was kicking into high gear. If Keith wanted to treat this like a business negotiation, I'd approach it with the same systematic methodology I used for client financial restructuring. The next morning, my sister arrived with coffee and pastries, taking one look at my face and immediately wrapping me in a hug. "I never liked how Keith talked about Natalie," she admitted. "None of us did." "Why didn't anyone say anything?" "We tried. Mom said something at Thanksgiving. Dad looked uncomfortable every time. I asked Keith if he was drunk. He just laughed it all off and made us feel like we were being too sensitive. Around 10 a.m., Natalie called. "Are you okay? I'm so sorry about last night." "You have nothing to be sorry for. Are you okay?" "Tom knows everything now. I showed him all the texts." My stomach dropped. There were texts? 20 minutes later, Natalie was at my apartment with her phone, showing me 4 months of messages from Keith. The first one was dated back to February, just checking in. "Hope you're doing well." Natalie had responded politely. "Thanks. I'm good. Hope you and my friend are well too." 3 days later, "Want to grab coffee sometime?" Just as friends. Natalie had ignored it. Then another one a week later. "Saw you at the gym. You looked great." Natalie had finally responded. "Keith, please stop texting me like this." Keith's reply made my skin crawl. "I'm just being nice. You're reading too much into friendly conversation." The pattern continued for months. Keith asking her to coffee, Natalie saying no. Keith telling her she deserved better than Tom. Natalie asking him to stop. Keith claiming he was just being friendly. Over and over, the same cycle. Every single message was sent when Keith knew I'd be at work or busy with something else. Each one was calculated and timed for maximum secrecy. This wasn't casual flirtation. This was systematic harassment with a documented timeline. My sister opened her laptop and created a spreadsheet. We're documenting everything. Every comment, every text, every time he showed up somewhere Natalie didn't expect him. By the time we finished, we had 47 documented incidents spanning 6 months. Public comments with witness names, private texts with timestamps, a clear pattern of escalating inappropriate behavior that Keith had specifically hidden from me. That afternoon, Keith showed up pounding on my apartment door. "I know you're in there. We need to talk." I spoke through the door without opening it. "I need space right now. You need to stay at your parents' house." "This is my apartment too. I have rights. You can't just lock me out." My sister called through the door. "Go to your parents' house, Keith. She'll call you when she's ready to talk." After 5 minutes of increasingly aggressive pounding, he finally left. My sister immediately pulled out her phone. "What's your landlord's number?" I called and explained that my husband and I were separating. The landlord confirmed we were both on the lease, but she couldn't force either of us out without legal cause or a court order. "So he can just show up whenever he wants?" "Technically, yes, unless you get a restraining order or something legal that says he can't." That evening, Keith's mother called. "Keith showed up here very upset. He says you kicked him out and won't talk to him. What's going on?" I took a deep breath and explained the situation systematically. Keith had been making inappropriate comments about Natalie for 6 months, telling everyone he'd leave me for her. Then I discovered he'd been texting her and showing up at her gym, asking her to coffee despite her repeatedly telling him to stop. There was silence. Then Myra laughed. "Oh, honey, boys will be boys. Keith was probably just trying to make you jealous. You know how men try to spice up a marriage sometimes?" "That's not spicing up a marriage, Myra. That's harassing my best friend and disrespecting me in front of everyone we know." "Well, I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it. Keith loves you. He's devastated right now. He needs to understand what he did wrong, not have his mother make excuses for him." I hung up before she could respond. My sister held up her hand for a high five. "That's the most backbone I've ever heard you show with Keith's family." The next morning, I called the divorce attorney my coworker had recommended. Colton Reese's office was downtown in a glass building that screamed competence and success. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with glasses and the kind of calm demeanor that suggested he'd seen this situation before. I explained everything systematically: the public comments, the private texts to Natalie, Keith's refusal to acknowledge why any of it was wrong. "I'm sorry you're going through this," Colton said, leaning back in his chair. "Keith's behavior is definitely inappropriate, but the good news is the divorce itself should be straightforward. You've only been married 2 years. No kids, no house, no major shared property beyond some furniture. He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. First thing you need to do is separate your finances immediately. Open your own bank account. Transfer half of any joint savings. Document any shared assets like furniture or cars. Do you think I should try marriage counseling first? Colton looked at me over his glasses. Do you want to fix a marriage with someone who doesn't think he did anything wrong? I shook my head. I'm done trying to fix something Keith doesn't think is broken. He still thinks everyone is overreacting. Then we can move forward with filing. I'll need you to gather some documents. Marriage certificate, bank statements, any evidence of his harassment toward your friend if he tries to make this difficult. I went straight from Colton's office to the bank. I opened a new account in just my name, then logged into our joint account online and transferred exactly half the savings, $4,200. My phone started buzzing 10 minutes later. You're stealing from me. That's our money, I texted back. I'm protecting my half. You should do the same with yours. He called. I didn't answer. He texted again, saying I was being crazy and unreasonable. I put my phone on silent and started making a list of our shared assets for Colton. 2 years of marriage didn't accumulate much. Furniture from IKEA, a coffee maker, some wedding gifts we'd never used. That evening, Natalie called to tell me she'd shown Tom everything. He wanted to drive to Keith's parents' house and punch him, but I talked him out of it. How did he take it? He's mad he didn't notice sooner. I told him months ago that Keith made me uncomfortable, but I guess I downplayed it. Tom thought it was just awkwardness, not that Keith was actually trying to get me to cheat. An hour later, Tom called me directly. Hey, I just wanted to apologize. Natalie told me everything and I feel terrible. She mentioned Keith made her uncomfortable a while back, but I didn't realize he was actively pursuing her. You don't need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. I know, but I should have paid more attention when Natalie seemed uncomfortable around him. Tom paused. For what it's worth, Natalie and I both want to stay friends with you no matter what happens with your marriage. After I hung up with Tom, something loosened in my chest. I'd been so worried about losing friends over this mess, but Keith was the one who'd created the uncomfortable situation. I was just the one finally addressing it. The next morning brought an unexpected call from Keith's father. I heard what happened. I wanted to call and say I'm disappointed in my son's behavior. I almost dropped the phone. That's not what I expected to hear. Myra called me furious about you kicking Keith out. Then I talked to Keith himself and heard his version. But I also talked to your sister and got the real story. Quentin's voice was quiet but firm. What Keith did was wrong. What can I do to help? Honestly, Keith needs to understand why his behavior was inappropriate, not just apologize to make it go away. I know. I raised him better than this. His mother is making excuses, but I won't. If there's anything you need, you call me. 2 days later, my mom called. Your sister told me everything. Do you need to come stay with us for a while? I'm not leaving, Mom. Keith's the one who messed up. He should be the one dealing with the inconvenience. There was a pause. Then she said something that made my throat tight. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. You've always been too nice, too willing to keep the peace. It's about time you put yourself first. That weekend, Keith texted asking to meet for coffee to talk like adults about this. I stared at the message for a long time before responding that I'd meet him, but only in public, and my sister would be there. Why does your sister need to be there? This is between us. I need support. Take it or leave it. We met at a coffee shop near the mall. Keith was already there when we arrived, sitting at a corner table with his arms crossed, like he was preparing for a hostile negotiation. I wanted to talk to my wife alone, he said when he saw my sister. I'm here for support. Start talking. Keith's jaw tightened, but he turned to me. Look, I'm sorry. I know I took the jokes too far, but you have to understand. Work has been really stressful lately, and I haven't felt appreciated at home, and sometimes I just... My sister cut him off. Those aren't reasons to harass another woman. Those are excuses. You're deflecting." Keith's face went red. "I'm trying to apologize here." "You're trying to justify. There's a difference." He turned back to me, desperation creeping into his voice. "I can't do anything right, can I? You're just going to hold one mistake over my head forever. Maybe we should just get divorced if that's what you want." "It wasn't one mistake, Keith. It was 6 months of you disrespecting me and Natalie. 47 documented incidents, plus all the texts and showing up at her gym. That's not one mistake, that's a pattern." Keith's face went from red to almost purple. "You're documenting things. What are you? Building a case against me?" "I already talked to a divorce attorney. I'm serious about ending this." "You what? When?" "Last week. His name is Colton Reese. He's filing the papers." Keith stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "This is insane. You're insane." My sister stood up too. "We're done here." Keith stormed out, and I sat there shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. For the first time in our marriage, I'd maintained my position without backing down or apologizing for Keith's behavior. At work the next day, I must have looked terrible because 3 different people asked if I was okay. During lunch, my closest work friend Rebecca pulled me aside. "What's going on? You've seemed stressed for weeks." I told her everything. The comments, the texts to Natalie, the divorce proceedings. She listened without interrupting, then said something that made my stomach drop. My ex-husband did something similar, kept making comments about my younger coworker. I asked him to stop, and he said I was being jealous and insecure. The comments never stopped. They just got quieter. I ended up divorcing him 2 years later. Rebecca squeezed my shoulder. I wished I'd done it sooner. The next morning, a delivery guy showed up at my office with a huge bouquet of roses. The card said Keith was sorry and wanted to work on our marriage. I looked at them for about 10 seconds, then walked them straight to the break room and left them on the counter with a note, "Free flowers." Rebecca saw me do it and gave me a thumbs up. Grand gestures don't fix months of harassment. That afternoon, Colton called. "The papers are ready. I'm having Keith served at his parents' house tomorrow. Are you prepared for him to react badly?" "As ready as I can be." The next day, my phone started ringing at 11 in the morning. Keith. I let it go to voicemail. He called 6 more times. Finally, I answered. "You had me served at my parents' house. You blindsided me. You didn't give me a chance to fix things. We met for coffee 3 days ago. I told you exactly where things stood. You said you talked to an attorney. I didn't think you'd actually do it." "What did you think I meant, Keith?" "That you were bluffing, trying to scare me into apologizing. You don't get to be surprised when I do exactly what I said I would do." 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived from Keith's attorney. I opened it at my kitchen table with my hands shaking. The response was 10 pages long and painted me as the villain. Keith claimed I'd abandoned our marriage without warning, refused to work on our relationship, and turned his family and friends against him with false accusations. The last page requested that I pay half his attorney fees since I was the one who initiated the divorce. I took pictures of every page and sent them to Colton, who called me back within an hour. "This is standard manipulation," he said calmly. "Keith's trying to make you feel guilty and maybe scare you into backing down. We have documentation of his behavior toward Natalie going back months. His claim that you abandoned the marriage won't hold up when we show the court why you asked him to leave." Over the next few weeks, I started documenting Keith's social media posts. He was putting up vague stuff about how his wife didn't appreciate him and gave up on their marriage too easily. One post said something about how modern women bail at the first sign of trouble instead of working through problems. My phone started blowing up with messages from mutual friends asking what was going on. At first, I thought about staying quiet and not engaging. Then I realized I was doing the same thing I'd always done with Keith, staying quiet to keep the peace while he controlled the narrative. When people reached out, I gave them the facts. I explained that Keith spent 6 months telling everyone he'd leave me for Natalie, including at family gatherings and dinner parties. I told them about the private texts he sent, asking her to coffee and telling her she deserved better than Tom. I mentioned that he showed up at her gym even after she told him to stop. The response was overwhelming. Almost everyone said they'd always thought his comments were inappropriate, but didn't know how to address it. Several people apologized for not speaking up when Keith made those jokes in front of them. 2 of Keith's friends reached out privately with apologies. One said he thought Keith was just being crude and didn't realize Keith was actually pursuing Natalie behind my back. Both said they'd testify on my behalf if needed. The mediation session happened at Colton's office 2 weeks later. Keith showed up with his attorney, who immediately started painting me as vindictive for changing the locks and refusing to consider reconciliation. Colton stayed calm and pulled out our documentation. The timeline showing all 47 comments Keith made about Natalie, with dates and witnesses. The text messages Keith sent over 4 months. The gym incidents where Keith showed up knowing Natalie's schedule. Keith's attorney's face went from confident to deflated in about 30 seconds. The whole energy in the room shifted after that. We reached a settlement after 3 hours. Keith would take his car and personal belongings. I got the furniture and could stay in the apartment until the lease ended. We split our savings account exactly in half, $4,200 each. Keith signed everything while staring at me with a look that was half angry and half something else I couldn't identify. His hand shook slightly when he wrote his signature. After mediation, Keith followed me to the parking lot and blocked my car door. He said I'd ruined his entire life over nothing, that I'd thrown away our marriage because I couldn't take a joke. I looked at him standing there and felt absolutely nothing. I told him he'd ruined his own life by refusing to respect boundaries and treating people like they didn't matter. Then I got in through the passenger side and drove away, watching him stand alone in the parking lot through my rearview mirror. My mom came over that weekend to help pack Keith's remaining belongings. In the back of his nightstand drawer, she found a small notebook. Inside, Keith had written down Natalie's work schedule for 3 months, her gym times by day of the week, notes about what coffee shop she went to and what grocery store she used. My skin crawled looking at those details in Keith's handwriting. This wasn't casual interest or harmless jokes. This was calculated, stalking behavior. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks after I'd packed Keith's suitcase that first night. Colton called to tell me the judge had signed everything. It was one of the faster, uncontested divorces he'd handled, probably because Keith's attorney knew they couldn't defend his behavior in court. Natalie and Tom invited me over for dinner the night after the divorce was final. They had champagne and made my favorite pasta. Tom made a toast to better judgment in future relationships. We all clinked glasses, and I felt lighter than I had in months. 6 months after the divorce, Keith sent one final email saying he finally understood what he'd done wrong and was sorry. 3 paragraphs about his therapy insights and how he recognized his pattern of making me feel insecure on purpose. I read the whole thing, felt absolutely nothing, and deleted it. His understanding came too late and wasn't my concern anymore. A year after I'd packed Keith's suitcase, I was genuinely thriving. My work performance had improved so much that I'd gotten a promotion and a 15% raise. I'd reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from during the marriage. My apartment felt peaceful instead of tense, and I could make plans without worrying about complaints later. I'd learned that someone repeatedly telling you they'd leave you isn't a joke. It's a warning you should listen to. Standing up for yourself isn't giving up on a relationship, but finally choosing yourself first after choosing someone else for too long. The life I was building felt solid and real instead of fragile and conditional. And for the first time in years, I was sleeping through the night without waking up anxious about what mood my partner would be in the next day.